Hello guys, welcome to our 9th PHP tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to go ahead and do another exercise. So this will be our second exercise. In this exercise, I thought we will go ahead and create another form, basically, which will allow us to create tables. So what will the form do? It will accept two inputs, the number of columns and rows. And based on that inputs, so we're going to validate the inputs, make sure that they're giving us, numeric inputs. And once we have those, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a function which will create a table with the number of rows and columns that the user inputted, and we're going to create that table and then just display that to the user so they can go ahead and use that table. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's go ahead by typing doc-type HTML. And if you don't understand something initially, guys, don't worry, we're going to go over it once we're done typing our code. So this will be a two-part tutorial. In the first part, we're going to create the form and do the validation. In the second part, we're going to create the function, which will actually create the table itself. Alright, so in the head here, let's go ahead and put a short title. So it can be called a tutorial or exercise 2 maybe. And now let's go inside of our body. In the body here, we're going to create a form. So let's give this form a method. Let's submit it post, then action. We're going to submit it to itself again. So I call this form main. As you see here, it's main, but it's within the exercise 2 folder. So I'm going to submit it to itself. Now I'm going to give it a style as well. By style, I'm just going to give it a border here. So let me give it a border, just so it looks more like a, like a form. I'm going to make it solid, 1 pixel, and I'm going to give it a color. So what does that mean? Basically, we're telling it that we want a border, we want it to be solid, so we want the line to be solid and not dotted or anything like that. We want it to be 1 pixel in width or thickness, and then we want the color. So this is a hex version of a color, so this is pretty much a darker gray color, but you can look these color codes online if you want, or you can just type the name of the color. So if you just want to make it black, you can just type, if you want the border to be black, you can type black or any color, but I'm just using this color code as you have a little bit more flexibility with color codes. Alright, so within here I'm going to have an input. So first I'm going to call it number of rows. I'm just going to type number sign rows, and then I'm going to accept an input, give it a name, and I'm going to call it rows. And then I'm going to call it type. I'm going to give it a type of text, and I'm going to put a break here at the end. In the next line, I'm going to put the number of columns here, so the user can give us a number of columns itself. Then I'm going to give it a name of columns. I'm going to call it cols, short for columns. And then I'm going to make it text as well. And let's put a break here at the end. Last, we're going to put a button. So let's give it a name. I'm just going to call it button this time, just to keep it short, but you guys can give it a more descriptive name. Let's give it a type of submit, and also let's create, or let's give it a value of, let's say, create table. So when they click on this, the table will be created. Alright, so now let's go ahead and just see what this would look like in our browser. So let me navigate there. So you go ahead and navigate to where you saved your PHP file. So I'm going to type exercise here, and I call it main. Okay, so exercise 2 main.php. Let's see what we have here. We have exercise 2 main.php, but I forgot to type what's within the PHP folder. So here we go. As you see here, we have the border surrounding our table here. Currently it's doing nothing, as we're not given any inputs and we didn't write the PHP code. But now let's go back. So we're gonna go ahead and do a validation here. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that here underneath the form this time. Gonna put the PHP open and closing tag just so we define that this is our PHP section. And here we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna check if our post values are set or exist, if they're being passed to us. So I'm gonna check if we're getting the rows. We also need the columns, so let's go ahead and do that as well. So we're checking for columns, and finally let's check the buttons being clicked. So alright, so now that we're checking, okay, so we're saying, okay, so if we're getting all these three, so basically we're getting the rows, we're getting a number of rows, number of columns, we're okay, we can go ahead and start our validation. Before we do that, create a variable called rows, just for keeping this short, so I don't have to type post rows every time. I'm going to do the same thing for columns, and this one for columns, so we don't have to rewrite those every time. We have to do an if statement. Then our if statement here, first of all, let's check if we're getting those. So if we have the number of rows, basically, because they could be submitting nothing and we don't want anything empty, so if they're empty, if they don't give us a value for either rows or columns, what we want to do is we want to tell them, hey, that these are required and we need something for them. So let's go ahead and break out of our PHP here. I'm going to close our PHP here and reopen it here, and in here we're going to display an error message. Let's give it a style, so we can give it a different color here, red for an error message. And we're going to say I'm going to type all fields are required, but you guys can type any message you wish. Alright, and now let me go back in here again. So that's, now let's check if they are else. So we can change, so we can check this one separate. So what other criteria do we need here to check besides them, we need both values? So we also need to make sure that they are numeric. So if somebody passes us, a string or invalid characters, we want to tell them, hey, that we only can accept numeric values. So we're going to do the same thing here. So we're going to type a isNumeric, which is a PHP function which checks if checks that the value is a number, and so let's check that. So it's numeric, and then we want to check if both columns and rows are both numbers. So we're going to do here, if one of them is not a number, then we want to echo an error. So I'm going to do here columns, should be a $sign, columns, and here I'm misspelled it, so it's numeric. Alright, so if they both are numeric, or one of them is not numeric, sorry, what we want to do is we want to give them an error message saying, hey, that we need say, let's copy this one and let's tell them that we need both fields to be numeric. I'm going to say, for shorthand, I'm going to say all fields must be numeric. Okay, so now that we checked this numeric, if you want to make it a little bit more custom, guys, you can check this separate. So you can check the row separately and the column separately, and you can tell them, you can give them more detailed error messages. So you can say, like, if this, you can say, like, rows must be numeric and columns must be numeric if you check them separately. You can do that as well. But another condition here that we're going to check if they are negative. So if they are numbers, we have to make sure that the rows is greater than 0, so if the number of rows is less than 0, or the number of columns it's less than 0, that means they are negative. We cannot accept that, because we don't want to accept negative numbers, because that break our code. So let's go ahead and make sure that we don't accept any of them as well. So let's tell them that all fields must be non-negative. Again, if you want to make this more custom, you can check them separately and then say that rows cannot be, negative, or columns cannot be negative. Otherwise, in here, we're gonna go ahead and create, basically call our function, so which will be called create table, and in here we want to pass it the number of rows and the number of columns. And this function we will create in the next tutorial. But what this will do is basically it will see that we're passing it a number of rows, a number of columns, and based on those two numbers, since we validated and we make sure that everything is correct, it will go ahead and create the table and then display it. But we're gonna leave that for next tutorial. So I'm gonna comment this out, and let's go ahead and make sure that our validation here works. So, all right. So let's give it. Let's pass nothing in. So we get that all fields are required. Give it one of them. We still get all fields are required because we only passed one. So now let's pass a character and a number. We should get that all fields must be numeric. So if we pass them numeric but a negative number, all fields must be numeric. And if we pass them two positive numbers, let's pass the two positive numbers here. One and the one. It must be numeric. Okay, so we have something wrong here. This is numeric. Oh, okay. So what we did wrong here was we need to put a not numeric. Basically, we want to display the message if they're not numeric, not if they are. Alright, so let's go ahead and do that again. So if we give them nothing, they're required. If we give them a numeric value and a non-numeric value, we should get the all must be numeric. But if we give them a numeric value and a negative value, we should get all fields must be non-negative. But now if we give it a correct one, so if we give it two numbers, let's say like that, we should get nothing. And the nothing is the else condition here, which we're going to go ahead and define in our next tutorial, which will be to create the table itself. Alright guys, so thank you for watching this tutorial, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel guys. It really means a lot. If you have any suggestions about tutorials or you need help with anything, don't hesitate to send me a message, and I'll be so the next part will be creating the function which will create a table. So that will be for next tutorial. Again, thank you for watching, and it won't be too late until I come up with the next tutorial on creating the table. So thank you guys, and don't forget to subscribe.